Peace and love, wonderful Kenyan family from around the world. How are you doing? My name is Spikes, and this is the Kenyan podcast on a show where we get to discuss different matters that are taking place in the 254 training and topical. Welcome so much, and thank you for choosing the Kenyan podcast to be your number one podcast for updates and trending matters. We truly do get to appreciate you every time you get to tune in and just find out what's going on with the 254. Now, of course, I want to give a quick shout out to everyone that has actually followed us on Spotify. We are also on other different platforms such as Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, and we are also hoping to continue diversifying the platforms on which you can actually do find us and ways in which you can be able to tune in. We are hoping to give you a wonderful experience with the KM Podcast. I also want to give a quick shout out to everyone that has subscribed to our social media platforms on Instagram, Kenyan Podcast. We are also on Twitter, Kenyan Podcast, and also on Facebook, Kenyan Podcast. Thank you so much to everyone that has been tuning in and giving us the wonderful feedback. You can also, write to us, kenyanpodcast@gmail.com. We would really love to hear from you and get to know, some of the feedback regarding some of the things that you have been discussing right here on the Kenyan Podcast. Like I said, today being on the 1st of May, the year 2021, I just want to wish everyone a happy Labor Day. We do understand that it's another wonderful time for Atuoli to step up, and give that particular speech that he gets to give every now and then, talking about the rights of the Kenyan workers. But then again, he has been making speeches for a very long time. The only problem I do have with Atuoli is like he is always on the exclamation mode. He says Allah, Allah, Allah. And of course, how many Kenyans have actually caught on that? And if you have in conversation with people on the streets and have them saying Allah, it's like they do call it alama ya mshangao. That is what we can call as the mark of Atuoli, who has been representing, for the workers in Kenya, and he has been trying to agitate for their rights everywhere. I want to give a quick salute to the teachers, to the farmers, to the judges, to everyone that has been involved actively in the nation building of our beautiful country, the 254. The only people I might not be giving a quick shout right now are the politicians. The people who are always striving harder to get a pay rise. They are always striving harder to get all these allowances, to get new cars, the MCAs, and things like that. But nonetheless, for every other person, this is a big shout out to you. Asante sana kwa kazi ambayo unaifanya, wherever you might be working at, whether you are a matatu tout, whether you are a matatu driver, whether you are a doctor, a nurse, wherever you might be, whatever sector you might find yourself in. We want to truly appreciate you, and especially even the Jua Kali sector. Many people have been putting in work and doing wonderful things, really to fend, to provide for their families, and also to make a decent livelihood, which has been a difficult case when we talk about the lockdown in our beautiful country, the 254. Right now, as it is, there has been a speech being given by the president, and he has actually removed the cessation of our movement. He has removed the restriction. Now people can travel around. There was a restriction and a cessation of movement from Nairobi into other different areas, Machakos, Nakuru, and a few others that were pointed out, where people could not really get in or get outside, apart from the essentials, all the people moving goods. But nonetheless, I want to give a quick shout out to all the people that have been putting the pressure on social media, especially on Twitter. There has been what was planned as the march, as a march to State House. The people wanted to go to State House next week and get the answers from the horse's mouth. But nonetheless, we want to give a quick shout out to, or at least that kind of, he has there to make the measures at least a little bit lenient, because people were suffocating. For me personally, let me speak on my own behalf. I was really suffocating. I wouldn't be able to travel and I move from Nairobi and I go up country. But right now, maybe I will get the opportunity. I'll go check on how the family is doing, and I'll go check on my peoples. That would be a wonderful thing. But nonetheless, this is a KM podcast. Do not forget, and remember, you can check us out on our social media platforms. We are on Twitter. It seems like I'm having guests on the show. There's some crows making some noise outside. I don't know what that has to do with the podcast. But nonetheless, I want to give a quick shout out also to everyone, of course, also finding us on Facebook. We have been getting really wonderful feedback from our Facebook platform. If you haven't liked our page, please make sure you do like our page. It's a KM podcast on that particular platform. And being on a lazy weekend, I want to know, what are you up to this particular Labor Day weekend? Please do let us know. For many times you do find people just kicking it back. For me, I'm just kicking it back and just having to update you on what's going on. I wanted to touch briefly on something today. Apart from the matter matter of us celebrating our workers and us celebrating everyone who has been putting work towards building the country and also towards building their life, I wanted to touch on something else that has been happening, and I do believe you might get to concur or agree with me when it comes to some of the things, some of the lessons, some of the tough lessons, some of the hard lessons Kenyans haven't learned yet. You might be wondering what I'm talking about. You might be wondering what is it going on about. But these are some of the hardest lessons that Kenyans haven't learned yet. Lesson number one, I actually alluded to this particular one. One of the lessons is that Atuoli, of course, has to leave Ikamwe. Atuoli never gets, you cannot really surprise him because he's always on that exclamation mode. You might be telling Atuoli this and that, especially on the interviews. I do truly love the interviews that Atuoli has done. One of the lessons that the Kenyans ought to learn is that I don't think there is anything you will tell Atuoli that will actually shtua him, if I might say so. Hakuna kitu taambia Atuoli ambacho kitaweza kumshtua, and that is one of the things that Kenyans need to learn, especially the journalists who are busy asking him questions. I've seen him on for example, being interviewed by Jeff Koinange and other different interviewers, and even having conversation with journalists after his meetings. Atuoli is one guy I love. I'm not sure whether he might decide at some point to go in and vie for political office, maybe become the governor of this place or that other place. But nonetheless, it's a good thing to notice that Atuoli is a man who is, brings Kenyans together, when he's having a conversation. And of course, a conversation that really, really difficult. Another lesson that Kenyans haven't learned yet is that leadership is not a one-man job. Or, leadership is not a one-man job. We talk about the president. He has had a lot of pressure, and I'm not really just saying this so that I would sound like I'm in favor of what he has been doing. I do not really favor everything that he has been doing, but leadership cannot be a one man's job. We have been talking about giving the orders on what people can do to make sure that they are keeping, they are keeping well. But nonetheless, people want to, flaunt all sorts of laws and guidelines that have been given, then blame the president. But nonetheless, I would just like to ask, the Kenyans, any role that you can play in terms of standing in the gap in any different matter. It doesn't have to be even with the matter of corona. I'm talking about even with social development in the local levels, social or economic development in the local levels. We have to understand that leadership cannot be one man's job. No one man can say this is, you cannot put the burden on one person and then say they are not doing well, they're doing this and that, while you are not playing your own role. It would be very, very difficult. Another lesson that Kenyans are really haven't learned is that you cannot negotiate. You cannot negotiate fair during the peak hours. Some people are just wondering what did happen. Especially when it's raining. It has been raining for a minute, and what happens is that you might have left your bus stop or your bus station or the bus terminal, and the fare was at maybe 80 shillings. But then it starts raining, and then it's peak hours, and then you go back there and the fare has gotten to maybe 150, especially people who go to the diaspora. Wala watu wa Rongai tunaona na tunawapenda. Those guys, of course, do suffer the most when it comes to the fare hike. It's normally hiked even without any kind of notice or any expectation. Nasikia tu fare imepanda, and you cannot really negotiate with the touts, which is very, very crazy. Ikifika ni peak hours manze, huwezi negotiate fare. Hata kama umeambiwa ni, it's difficult, and that makes even life for Kenyans a little bit messy when it comes to even budgeting and planning for your finances for the week, because leo unalipa 50 bob, kesho unalipa so, the other day unalipa 80 bob, the other day unalipa 40. It's really, really crazy. But nonetheless, that is also another lesson, hard lesson that Kenyans haven't learned yet. Another thing is that you cannot really trust a hawker's price. You cannot really trust a hawker's price. Sometimes, not even the hawkers, especially when you're talking about the market, Muthurwa, Gikomba, and other different places. I have had experiences of going and doing some shopping kule, ambapo naambiwa hii hoodie ina go for 1500, and then you start having a commission. If you are not sleek, you will have a problem, because they will actually get your money. And I don't have a problem with the hawkers making their money and people selling, the retailers making their money on the street. But what I do get to realize is that you need to also have your bargaining skills up for you to be able to survive. Because even right here on the Kenyan podcast, we also want to put you on some life skills, not just telling you about entertainment and what's going on with everything else. It's also important that you are also able to have some skills. For example, the negotiating skills, which will be a wonderful thing. Nonetheless, before we continue some of the lessons, maybe or some of the observations maybe that Kenyans haven't really been keen on, it's also important to actually touch on something else that has happened over the week. It's a sad story. It has been going on for a minute, but there has been a story regarding the disappearance of men, 3 men that actually disappeared in Kitengela. They were at a local restaurant, and then boom, they disappeared. Of course, person cannot disappear into thin air. I do believe they were abducted, and there has been a report of bodies being found at Mathioya River. And of course, there has been the allusion, people alluding to the fact that these might have been an extrajudicial killing, because even their car, after they disappeared, their car was still there in Kitengela. So you cannot really say that they drove off and went to a place where they decided to hide, or they decided to, to just escape and get away. But nonetheless, it's important to also realize that, we need to be a brother's keeper. And when something is going wrong, really, maybe someone else can also come up and speak up. The investigation is still going on regarding what might have happened, what might have transpired, and what might have resulted to the disappearance of these particular men. There have been some bodies found. I believe I'm yet to confirm whether the bodies have been ascertained to be of these particular individuals. It's very, very important to also realize, all these changes, all these things are happening. We need to be a brother's keeper, and also make sure that we are taking on people to make sure, we know what's going on with them. Nonetheless, there's also something else. Kenyans have not really learned, to pay their taxes or file their taxes on time. For one thing, I do not know whether this is a Kenyan thing or it's an African thing. You realize that Kenyans want to be, the last minute. They want to do the last minute rush. Nataka kuwa kwa dakika ya mwisho unakimbia kuuliza KRA, kuuliza the platform, and then all of a sudden the platform is, iko na watu wengi sana mpaka maybe sometimes in a drop. Of course, we do say kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea, which is really paying taxes, is really helping the nation in nation building. But nonetheless, I also do believe that it's also important really to just do your due on time. I understand even when it comes to paying taxes, we do have the iTax platform, which has been created by the Kenya Revenue Authority. Maybe you can also do that particular due in time this particular time around. And there is also something else that I wanted to also really touch on. This has to do with the Kiberiti. Kiberiti has been trending for a minute, and someone might be asking, why was Kiberiti trending? What's going on with the Matchbox? Nini happened? There are some of the messages that did allegedly leak, quote unquote leak. And there was a conversation talking about maybe women using Kiberiti for some purposes, and then eventually the baby comes out looking like the mother instead of the father. And Kenyans do really love a good joke. Kenyans do really love some wonderful memes. I think Kenya has become a meme society. And I happen to realize that even when it comes to some matters that are not supposed to be taken very, very seriously, Kenyans will still find a day to go around making fun of all these particular matters. And so Kiberiti has been trending. Many memes have come out saying that the Kiberiti now will be going for 1,500. And many people coming up with different theories as to how the Kiberiti is being used by the women. And it's really it's really funny. If you look at all these memes, you will find them. Just search for the Kiberiti memes on Facebook or even on Twitter. You will find that the conversation is really funny around those particular matters, and people talk about things to do with the Kiberiti. But moving on from that, remember this is a Kenyan podcast, and like I said, you can get all of us on our different social media platforms, and also drop us an email, manze. Drop us an email. You can write to us kenyanpodcast@gmail.com, and you can also find us on Twitter, Kenyan Podcast. Make sure to tweet us, and also you can find us on our Facebook and Instagram. We hope that very, very soon we shall be able to be doing some live on Instagram as well, just touching base and connecting with the family, and even being able to add some of our family also on the live. It's a good thing if we are able to add people on the live so that they can also get to interact with us and tell us what's going on. My name is Spikes, and I also hope that eventually we shall also be able to bring in some guests to discuss different matters and also give us their viewpoints regarding some of the matters that we get to discuss right here. Nonetheless, moving on, I want to talk about also another important matter, affecting the industry. Personally, myself, I'm an entertainment enthusiast, and I also love to attend events. Right now, we have not been able to do any events. We have not been able to do much, but nonetheless, the people in the entertainment industry have suffered. There was a recent meeting between the vice president, the deputy president, Mr. Ruto, and what did happen? There was a meeting, and also I think there was a Calligraph Jones and Deputy President William Ruto, and among other different entertainment personalities such as Jalango, I believe. And they were trying to find a way forward in how the people, the suffering of the entertainers can be alleviated or what can be done. And one of the people that has come out and talked about their suffering is Ite Mutai, who was one of the comedians on the Churchill show, talking about she has been suffering a lot. She has not been able to pay her rent arrears, and she was asking for the people to come through to her aid. She also wanted to sell her Facebook account. And I was wondering, I know, like I said, leadership is not a one man's role. You cannot say Churchill has actually failed the people, because Churchill has brought many people on the platform and he's actually done lots and lots for them. But some people are talking about, oh, why wouldn't Churchill also step in? But you cannot really help everyone. That is what I do believe. And also, we have a role to play also as Kenyans. Mahali idea, let's make sure that we are helping. She did say that she has been experiencing lots and lots of problems, of course, just like many other Kenyans. But nonetheless, when we are able to, and while we get the opportunity to be able to help, please let us do it. Let us really just go in and support the personalities that are suffering. Like I said, many DJs, of course, they have been rendered without work. Many artists, they have been rendered without places to perform, and many other different people who do take part and parcel in the entertainment industry. And therefore, I would also like the government to also look into the matter, but the government, you cannot really wait on the government. Gonzea serikali, you will suffer, my fellow Kenyan people. You might suffer, but nonetheless, it's a good thing when we are able to support. Just check on the people, your friends, how they are doing, fellow Kenyans, how they are doing. Talk to them and find out maybe if there's any way you can help, and if they're not, maybe someone else who can also come into their aid and help them in different regards. Nonetheless, this is the KM podcast. Like I said, it's always a delight to just talk about some of the things happening with our nation. This is just also a shorter episode. We will not go much into all these other details to do with what's coming next. But I do believe that one of the things that are coming up next is really the push for people really also to do not be reckless. But nonetheless, I would just also like to ask people, do not fear. I did have the opportunity, like I said, to go to Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, and I would tell you, in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, things are really easy. You cannot say that their hospitals are being filled up, but nonetheless, also, I do not say that COVID isn't there. I would just like to reiterate the fact that people should not really be living in fear and all these worry about what to do and area things like that. There are so many things going on in the world, but if you do find some chance to speak to some people, do not just stay to yourself. Do not just keep to yourself, because at the end of the day, we are human beings. We are affected psychologically, behaviorally, and in other aspects, financially, socially, and other all different aspects of life by the COVID pandemic. But nonetheless, that should not stop us from living, Manze. That should not stop us from living. Right now, there has been the lifting of these travel restrictions, or the cessation of our travel has been removed. And now people can actually go to Machakos, go to Thika, go to whatever place that you might want to go to. But that does not say that we should also be reckless. And it's also a good thing to make sure that you're living your life. Do not really live in fear, because fear is a low frequency. If you want to vibrate higher, you should just focus on the things that make you happy, and focus on the things that bring a little bit of joy into your life. And all the things that really would also be, getting some time to go out there and connect. Do not just be living in your house and staying in fear. And because at the end of the day, you are a human being, and us as human beings, we are actually humans, habitual creatures, and we are also social beings. We are also social beings. People talk about distancing. It's a good thing to distance, but you cannot really distance the whole time. This will actually take away from your happiness, your joy, and at the end of the day, you might be really wasting 2 years of your life. So far, this is the second year. Really just go out there and continue living. That is my message for today. Go out there and continue living. We would have talked about more ways in which perhaps you can make sure that you're keeping fit. For example, even exercising and getting also a book to read, and also meditating when you are able to find some time. I do not want to sound like a shrink. I do not want to sound like a shrink, but nonetheless, I want to keep on encouraging Kenyans to keep doing the thing, and I also to keep in the process of our nation building. And also the final message, please fight corruption where you can. Usikue unajiingiza kwa mambo ya corruption kila dakika. We are suffering, of course. We are losing many opportunities because of our corruption in our beautiful country. If we are to come together, maybe we will be able to also combat corruption as the young people of this beautiful African nation, and be able to push our economy forward, and also be able to push our nation forward where we need to push it. Nonetheless, this has been the KM Podcast Show with the Homeboy Spikes, and I hope that you are doing well, and I want to wish you a happy and productive Easter weekend. Wherever this particular day finds you, make sure that you're keeping safe, and make sure that you're also vibrating higher and in positivity. Till then, much peace and love. I want to say kwaheri ya kuonana.